Um, okay, so I want to talk about the apology first, because normally I'd skip past something like that, treat it as just part of the title, a hook, nothing to dwell on. But I sat with this one for a minute, and I don't think it's just a hook. I think there's something underneath it. Why would a reading apologize to you? What would there be to apologize for? And the more I sit with it, the more I think I understand. It's not an apology for bad news, it's an apology for disruption. Like, sorry, but your life is about to get a little more complicated. Sorry, but the version of things you've gotten comfortable with is about to be interrupted, not by something bad, by something big. And big things, even good ones, tend to come with a certain amount of, well, sorry, but here we go. That's the energy I'm picking up. So let's go into it. The first thing I want to address is high profile, because I think it's easy to hear that and immediately think celebrity or some kind of public figure with a recognizable name. And maybe that's accurate for some of you. But what I'm actually picking up is broader than that. What I'm sensing is someone with reach, someone whose decisions, whose attention, whose involvement in something has consequences that ripple outward in a way that most people's don't. This could be someone well known. It could also be someone who isn't a household name, but who occupies a position where what they think, who they choose to work with, who they pay attention to, actually moves things. The kind of person whose endorsement, whether of a project, an idea, or a person, carries weight that most endorsements don't. And what I'm feeling is that someone like this is about to become relevant to you, not in a passive, distant way, like you'll read about them somewhere, in a way that actually touches your life directly. Give me a second here because I want to understand how this happens, because I don't think it's random. Okay? What I'm sensing is that there's a connection point, someone in between you and this high profile person. Not necessarily someone you know well, maybe even someone fairly peripheral to your life right now, but this person, whoever they are, has some kind of access, some kind of line to the more significant figure I'm describing. And I think what's happening is that this peripheral person, this connector, has encountered something about you or your work or who you are that's made them think of you in relation to this other person. Like a kind of matching that's happening in someone else's head where they're going, oh, this reminds me of, or this would be perfect for, or I should mention this too. This is the part that I think explains the apology, actually. Because if this connection happens the way I'm feeling it, it's going to come somewhat suddenly, not built up over months of obvious developments that you could see coming. More like one day things are normal, and then there's a message or an introduction or an opportunity that involves someone whose name carries a lot more weight than you were expecting to be dealing with on an ordinary Tuesday. Has there been anyone in your life recently, maybe someone you wouldn't think twice about, who seemed a little more interested in what you're doing than usual? Someone asking questions, paying a little more attention, maybe in a way that felt slightly out of character for them? Tell me in the comments, because I think that person might be the connector here, even if neither of you has realized it yet. I want to talk about why this is happening now, because I think the timing matters. What I'm sensing is that you've reached a point where something about you, your work, your presence, the way you carry yourself has become more visible than it used to be. Not because you've changed your approach or started promoting yourself differently, more because of accumulation. The kind of thing where consistency over time eventually crosses a threshold of visibility, even if no single moment within that consistency felt like a big deal. I keep coming back to this idea of a threshold, like there's a level of visibility below which things stay relatively contained, mostly seen by people who are already close to your world. And then there's a level above which things start reaching people who are outside that world entirely. People who wouldn't have encountered you through the normal channels, but who, once something crosses that threshold, suddenly can. I think you've crossed that threshold recently, maybe without even noticing, because thresholds like this don't usually come with an announcement. You just keep doing what you're doing, and then one day someone outside your usual circles encounters it and reacts differently than the people inside your circles have gotten used to reacting. Because to them, it's new. It's not background noise. It's something they're seeing for the first time and noticing. Let me try to get more specific about what this high profile person's involvement might actually look like, because I don't want to leave this too abstract. What I'm picking up has a quality of recognition to it. Like, this isn't someone who's going to swoop in and dramatically change your circumstances overnight in some sort of fairy godmother way. It's more that their attention, their acknowledgement functions as a kind of stamp, a signal to other people who might be paying attention to what this person pays attention to, that you're worth paying attention to too. That might sound like it's about other people's opinions, and in a sense it is, but I don't think that's a small thing. We live in a world where attention from the right source can open doors that effort alone sometimes can't, not because effort doesn't matter, but because visibility and access are their own kind of currency, and most people don't have much of either until something or someone changes that for them. I think this person's involvement, whatever specific form it takes, functions like that, not as the whole story, but as an opening, a door that gets propped open, that you can then walk through using everything you've already built, everything that got you to this point in the first place. Now, I want to address the heart eyes part of this title because I don't think it's incidental and I think it's connected to something specific. What I'm feeling is that this isn't purely a professional or transactional thing. There's a personal dimension here too. And I think it might be connected to the same person, or it might be a slightly different thread that's developing around the same time. I'm not entirely sure which. But either way, I feel romantic energy here that's tied to this overall sense of things expanding, things becoming bigger than they've been. Here's what I mean. When your visibility increases, when more people are encountering you, when you're moving in slightly different circles than you used to, even just occasionally, even just for specific things, that creates more opportunities for the kind of connection that wouldn't have happened otherwise. Not because you're seeking it out, just because more exposure means more possibility in every direction, including this one. I keep getting a sense of someone noticing you in a new context. Maybe a context connected to whatever this higher profile situation turns out to be. Someone who wouldn't have crossed paths with you in your usual day to day, but who, in this new, slightly expanded context, does. And there's something about how you show up in that context, maybe a little out of your comfort zone, maybe slightly more visible than you're used to being, that catches their attention in a way that feels different from how attention usually works for you. Sometimes when we're slightly outside our normal environment, something in us shows up a little differently. Not fake, just a version of us that's a little more present, a little less automatic, because we're paying more attention ourselves, given the unfamiliarity. And that heightened presence is often more noticeable to other people than our usual comfortable autopilot selves. I think that's what's happening here. A version of you, slightly out of the ordinary context, being noticed by someone who wouldn't have had the opportunity to notice the everyday version. Have you had any sense, even vaguely, that something's shifting? That you might be stepping into spaces that feel a little different from your usual ones? Even small things count here. Tell me if something's coming to mind. I want to come back to the apology angle one more time because I think there's another layer to it that I haven't addressed yet. What if part of what this reading is apologizing for is the disruption to your sense of scale? Like you've probably built a picture of your life, your trajectory, what's realistic for you, based on the people and circumstances you've been surrounded by. And that picture, even if it's a positive one, even if you feel good about your life and where it's headed, is still built on a certain scale, a certain sense of how big things get, how far they reach, what's plausible. And what I'm feeling is that this is about to get bigger than that picture accounted for. Not infinitely bigger, not in some unrealistic, overnight transformation way, but bigger than the scale you've been operating with. And that kind of shift, even when it's entirely positive, can be disorienting because it requires you to recalibrate not just your circumstances, but your sense of what your circumstances even are, what's normal for you, what's available to you. That recalibration is uncomfortable sometimes, even when what's causing it is good. It's the discomfort of growth, of your container getting bigger faster than your sense of the container has caught up. And I think that's part of what's being apologized for here. Sorry, but you're going to have to think bigger than you've been thinking. Sorry, but the scale just changed. Let me talk about how to actually be in the face of all this, because I think there's a practical piece here that matters. The first thing I'd say is don't try to shrink this back down to fit your existing picture. There's going to be a temptation, I think, when something like this starts to unfold, to minimize it, to find reasons it's not as significant as it seems, to explain it away, or to assume there's been some mistake, some case of mistaken identity. Like, surely they don't mean me. Surely this isn't really happening the way it seems to be happening. Resist that. Not by forcing yourself to feel a confidence you don't have, but by just not actively working against what's arriving. Let it be as big as it actually is, rather than doing the work of making it smaller so it fits more comfortably into what you're used to. The second thing is stay attentive to the connector. Whoever this person is, the one in between you and the higher profile situation, I think your relationship with them matters here beyond just this one moment. They're the conduit, and conduits tend to keep being relevant even after the initial introduction or opportunity has passed. Don't let this person fade into the background just because the more prominent person becomes the focus. The connector is part of the story too, and probably will continue to be. I want to address something else, which is the question of whether you're ready for this. Because I think that question might be sitting with you even if you haven't asked it directly. What I'm picking up is that readiness in the sense of having everything figured out, having a plan, knowing exactly how to handle increased visibility or attention from someone significant. That kind of readiness isn't really the relevant kind here. Nobody fully has that kind of readiness before something like this happens. It's not a thing you prepare for in advance in some checklist sense. What you do have, though, is something more important. You have the actual substance, the actual quality of work, of character, of presence. That's what's attracting this attention in the first place. That's not something that needs to be built in response to this opportunity. It already exists. It's what got you here. The readiness isn't about having a plan for what happens next. It's about trusting that what's already true about you is enough to meet whatever comes, even if the meeting itself feels a little unfamiliar at first. I want to close with something about the hard eyes element again, because I think it deserves its own moment, separate from the bigger picture stuff. Whatever happens with this higher profile situation, professionally or in terms of visibility, I think there's something quieter and more personal also unfolding, somewhat in parallel. Someone is noticing you, genuinely. Not because of status, not because of who else is paying attention to you, but because of something about you in a moment that struck them as worth paying attention to. And I think that noticing is going to lead somewhere. Maybe not immediately, maybe not dramatically, but it's there and it's real and it's connected to this broader sense of things opening up, things expanding, the world you're moving through getting a little bigger than it's been. So, sorry, Virgo. Sorry that things are about to get more complicated in the good way. Sorry that your sense of scale is about to need an update, but also congratulations, because what's coming, both the bigger picture stuff and the quieter personal stuff, is real. And I think you're going to look back on this period as the moment things started genuinely expanding in more than one direction at once. Stay open to it. Even the parts that feel a little unfamiliar, especially those